Hello and welcome to OPA GCSE Sociology, and today we're going to be looking at what is the gender-based pattern of educational achievement, part 1. In fact, it's going to be broken down into 2 bits. The first bit is really looking at the selection of subjects based on gender, and a little bit looking at how girls are taking over boys in terms of educational success. And then the next part, we'll look at those internal and external factors. So for to do now, I just want you to complete the question that was the final task, the 12 marker on the previous video in the previous lesson. So discuss how far sociologists agree that class differences in educational achievement result primarily from in-school factors. Okay, and like I was saying last time, so you got that first paragraph that's agreeing with the statement. So you might talk about teacher interaction or streaming or setting, something like that. And then the second paragraph disagrees. So you're going to be talking about, there's loads of things you can talk about, but an example would be cultural deprivation or material deprivation. And then you conclude. Okay, so if you haven't already done that, might be worth giving it a go. Maybe go back to the first video, or the last video rather. I'm going to mute it for now. Feel free to pause it for 15 minutes if you need that time. Right, so obviously the video, you weren't in class, or you're not in class now, so you can't watch the video. So I'll just talk through those questions on task 1. So what are some of the reasons why girls do better than boys in school? So you can point to the fact there's been a cultural shift. So now that women's education and careers are taken more seriously, you can point to things like the revolution in contraceptives that mean that women don't feel they're sort of kind of not caught in this trap of having kids at a really young age because not practicing safe sex, or it might be to do with the fact as well there's a decline in traditional values through the decline of religions or secularization. And then what has been suggested could reduce this gender gap in education. So there is an emphasis on things like moving away from, as we were saying, streaming, encouraging STEM, so that's sort of certain subjects for boys and girls that aren't usually associated with one another. So yeah, there's a range of ways. Okay, so boys significantly outperformed girls in every area of education up until the 1980s. Since the 1990s, girls have achieved more than boys in most areas. And there was this sort of boom in the 60s, really, of more women going out to work, but it's really the 80s and the 90s. This idea, sometimes it's referred to as the third wave of feminism, sort of this feminization of the workplace. So for task 2, just note down the different statistics on gender and educational success. So this is not a particularly long video, just noting down some of those stats. You don't have to do all of them, but it's just giving you an idea of that gender gap in educational success. So we've got, in terms of Department of Education, so this is looking at the gap of grade 9. So a lot more girls, so 1.4% more girls than boys achieve grade 9, and roughly 6.1% of girls, more than boys rather, achieve grade 7 or above. So you can see that there, nearly a quarter of them, compared to just under 20% for the boys. Another example, so this is really looking at the uptake, so what subjects are largely being taken. And it's key to point out sort of the maths and science is still largely dominated by men, and it's really sort of the humanities subjects that are dominated by women. So you can see here things like oh, sorry, no, before we go on to that, that comes a bit later on. Ignore what I've just said. So yeah, this is still talking about the success rate, so it's a little bit dated. It's looking at the percentage of those achieving A stars to C, so that would be the equivalent of sort of 9 to 5s. And you can see the percentage is a lot higher in all cases, even if we go back a couple more years for girls compared to boys. Okay, so women in UK are 35% more likely than men to go to university. In 1990, 34,000 women graduated from university compared to 43,000 men. By 2000, this reversed with 133,000 women graduating compared to 110 men. So it's not just achievement in secondary school, college. This is in further education, higher education, at university level. And this was an example in the class. Obviously, I'm not going to go into names, but you can see the average as well, even for girls. So to put it on a really localized example in this class, just shows you even in this context, girls are doing better than boys. So this was the average percent for boys and girls in each assessment. Okay, so just for task 3 now, this is what I was referring to earlier. I got mixed up. So for task 3, what do you think are the top 3 A-level subjects for both boys and girls? I kind of gave it away a little bit earlier. So just give it a go and see what you can come up with. So what I was saying earlier and spilt the beans a little bit on, generally boys dominate the sort of maths and the science subjects, sort of computing, things like that, whereas girls dominate the social sciences and humanities. So you can see, look at computing, look at maths, look at physics for boys. Okay, much higher. Compare that now, flip it on the other side. For girls, compare sociology, psychology, art and design, English. So you can see there's this dominance with girls. So just the final thing here. So note down at least two of the studies that explain the reason for gender-based subject choices on the next slide. Okay, and I'm just going to read through them. So we've got Murphy and Elwood found that there was a link between primary socialization of gender roles and a broad subject area in later years. For example, boys were more familiar with science equipment outside of school, which made them more likely to pick science at higher level. So that kind of links into Anne Oakley's idea of canalization that we've talked about as well. So this idea of gender constructs through toys and things like that. And then Mitsos and Brown found that factors within school influence gender-based options. So gender stereotyping in textbooks, limited female role models in maths and science classes, and stereotyping by teachers. So yeah, especially even when I was at school, sort of noticing in the textbooks, it would be, if it was something like physics, it would always be men. If it was something like drama, it was always performance, and there'd be like an image of women. So yeah, it's just an example there. And then Murphy and Elwood, again, at a young age, boys are more likely to read hobby or information-based books, whereas girls are more likely to read stories about adults. This is believed to influence boys deciding to orient towards hard sciences. This idea of very learning and information that is very black and white and very sort of statistical driven, just like the hardcore sciences and maths, compared to maybe information and learning that is a bit more nuanced in terms of it's a bit more subjective and perspective orientated. Yeah. So the next lesson, like I said, is really where we look at those internal and external factors. Okay, that's the end of the recording.